Under the shroud of twilight, as autumn winds whispered secrets through skeletal branches, 4 figures emerged onto the tattered road leading into Blackwood Village. The derelict cottages, their roofs sagging with age, crouched like silent sentinels beneath a sky smeared with iron clouds. The damp earth exhaled a chill mist that clung to their jackets and hair. The only sound was the distant murmur of Myamore Lake, its surface rippling with invisible currents, promising ancient sorrows and hidden dangers. No one spoke as they stepped forward, each heart pulsing with equal parts curiosity and dread, drawn by stories of the Water Witch. Myamore Lake lay at the center of a wide clearing, its waters an obsidian mirror reflecting trembling reeds at its edge. Legends had long spoken of a healer named Elira Blackwood, whose gentle hands soothed the wounds of villagers a century past. They claimed her kindness turned toxic after betrayal, and that her spirit now swept along the shore at night, singing sorrowful lullabies that could draw unsuspecting wanderers into its cold depths. The surface of the lake glowed dimly in wan moonlight, beckoning with a promise of revelation and ruin, an invitation that no rational mind could easily dismiss. Eva Monroe raised her camera with trembling fingers, her breath visible in the icy air as she framed a shaky shot of broken gravestones half sunken in mire. At 17, she carried the weight of her past behind unblinking eyes, determined to expose the village's darkest truth for her online channel. Though she kept her face stoic, each click of the shutter echoed her inner struggle, a silent battle between fear and the desperate need for closure. A closure long denied since her twin sister vanished beneath unknowable waters years before. Memories of that fateful day surfaced unbidden. The laughter of 2 children at the water's edge, the sudden absence of one, the frantic scramble along soggy banks. No body ever emerged, and no explanation sufficed. Townsfolk offered comforting tales of runaway girls, but Ava knew grief when she tasted it. She sought confrontation with unseen forces, recording her whispered promises to find answers, to bridge the gap between regret and acceptance. Her channel had once thrived on staged frights. Now it pulsed with genuine anguish, each frame a testament to sorrow's enduring grip. Alongside Ava stood her 3 friends. Liam, the restless dreamer whose sharp wit masked a yearning for belonging. Sarah, whose gentle voice belied an iron resolve and who carried burdening secrets of her own. And Raj, the logical skeptic, always with a notebook in hand, seeking tangible proof to disprove fables. They gravitated toward Ava's magnetism, drawn by her bravery, and an inexplicable bond forged in shared curiosity. Together, they formed a quartet, poised to challenge the veil between life and the beyond. As they crossed the village threshold, shuttered windows gaped like hollow eyes, and doors sagged on broken hinges. Vine-choked porches creaked beneath tentative bootsteps. The scent of mildew and rotting leaves mingled with something more ancient, an undercurrent of fear that settled deep in their lungs. Every snapping twig and distant rustle reminded them they had trespassed into territory where unwritten rules demanded respect. Yet their cameras continued to roll, documenting shadows that flitted behind ruined walls, as though the village itself watched them with impatient intent. Night fell without warning, smothering the horizon in a suffocating veil of black. They huddled in the shell of the old town hall, its vaulted ceiling stained by dripping moisture. Ava's hands shook as she adjusted the lamp's wick. Outside, the wind carried indistinct voices, half-formed chants that skirted the edge of comprehension. Static crackled through their equipment, and Sarah swore she glimpsed a pale silhouette beyond the threshold, dissolving when she blinked. Each member of the group felt adrenaline twist into something more primal anticipation laced with dread. A sudden scream shattered the uneasy calm, ricocheting through the corridors like a fractured whisper. Eva dropped her camera to catch Sarah's wary expression. Liam stumbled from the gloom, ice glazed, voice thin as he murmured, "She's waiting." His words lodged in the air, uncomfortably close to the old wooden door that led to the forest. They didn't need to ask whose name he whispered. Together, they raced toward the sound, flitting lantern light, dancing across peeling paint and splintered floorboards, hearts hammering in unison. In the drizzle beyond the threshold, Liam stood at the forest's edge, fixed on a direction only he could see. The mist clung to the trees, obscuring trails and landmarks. Branches swayed, though no wind stirred them, and the path ahead bore the imprint of fans that led nowhere. Ava called his name, voice taut, but he only stepped forward as if drawn by an invisible hand. Sarah grabbed his arm. Raj shone his light onto the ground, illuminating footprints that vanished at the water's boundary. Every instinct screamed to retreat, and yet they pressed on. Deeper into the woods, the air grew dense with moisture and sorrow. Each labored breath left flickering plumes in the lantern glow. The group passed a circle of stones eroded by time, their surfaces worn smooth by countless pilgrimages. Carved initials lay half erased, offering a silent testament to those who had come seeking something beyond the mundane. A single white flower pushed through a crack in a stone, its petals, pristine among ruin and omen, both delicate and unsettling. Whoever planted it had done so recently, stirring questions without answers. Ava's recorder crackled, capturing every whisper of the forest. At times, the wind carried her own memories back to her, his laughter echoing in impossible patterns. She stumbled upon a slab inscribed with Elira's name and the date of her drowning. The letters, though weathered, gleamed with an unnatural clarity, pulsing like a heartbeat in the fog. Sarah pressed her palm to the rock, recoiling as it shivered beneath her touch. The presence around them thickened, folding reality inward, until even the moss underfoot seemed charged with expectancy. A clearing revealed the abandoned chapel, its steeple leaning as though in supplication. Broken stained glass scattered like jeweled tears around the threshold. The heavy door stood ajar, beckoning. Inside, pews lay in splintered heaps, and the altar bore the faint outline of once sacred inscriptions. Ava hesitated, recalling warnings scrawled in the margins of old manuscripts that cursed spaces could amplify the restless dead. Yet her determination steeled her resolve. Raising her light, she ventured beneath the ribbed ceiling, each footstep a drumbeat announcing their trespass. Behind the altar's fractured remains, Raj discovered a weathered journal bound in damp leather. Its pages were brittle but intact, scrawled in elegant script that danced across margins. Leafing through, they found the intimate entries of Elira herself, her days spent tending the sick, her hopes whispered in candlelight, and her agony as suspicion turned neighbors into executioners. She had tried to plead her innocence, offering remedies and blessings, yet jealousy and fear suffocated reason. The journal crackled in Raj's hands as though eager to divulge secrets long buried. The group clustered around as Sarah began to read aloud. Elira had loved a man of power who promised to protect her, only to curse her name when ambition eclipsed compassion. The mayor had manipulated rumors, turning compassion into malice. Panic and accusation rose until villagers dragged her to the lake's edge, chanting her name as her pleas drowned beneath spreading ripples. As Sarah's voice faltered, the chapel shuddered, and a low moan resonated through the rafters, weaving sorrow and rage into a single chord. The spirit stirred. Before they could react, whispers fluttered at the edge of hearing, soft, insistent, carrying the weight of 100 regrets. Liam's gaze hardened. He murmured words in a language none recognized, his tone chilling in its conviction. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching toward them like yearning fingers. Ava's pulse pounded, her grip tightening on the journal. The lamp sputtered as though fighting unseen gusts. Each friend felt the same dread. This was no mere haunting, but the awakening of something old, something that had waited beneath the glassy surface for a moment such as this. Hallucinations unfurled around them. Sarah glimpsed her mother's face contorted by sorrow, calling from an unseen doorway. Raj watched in horror as the walls dripped with dark ichor that vanished before he could touch it. Ava saw the twin she had lost, beckoning from a submerged pier, her lips moving without sound. Every whisper seemed to originate from their own buried regrets. The chapel door slammed shut, sealing them in a cocoon of memory and manipulation. Reality snapped, and none could tell where the present ended and the curse began. Sarah's vision deepened, revealing moments she had tried to forget. A childhood promise broken, a lie spoken in haste, the guilt that had taken root and thrived in secrecy. Tears blurred her view as the specter of her shame materialized before her, urging confession. She reached for Eva, voice strangled, but the apparition vanished like smoke, leaving Sarah trembling. In that stillness, each friend confronted an unwelcome truth. The water witch did not simply consume bodies, but exposed the fractures that lay hidden within each soul. For Raj, the ghost's influence took the form of unanswered questions from his journal, cryptic symbols and half-finished diagrams. He saw the outlines of a ritual meant to bind Elira's spirit, yet the final steps were erased. His rational mind recoiled as patterns emerged in the peeling paint of the walls, pulsing with a logic beyond human comprehension. He scribbled feverishly in the margins, desperate to reconstruct what had been stolen. But each line he wrote shredded another piece of his certainty, leaving only a void where skepticism once thrived. Accusations fractured the group. Sarah blamed Ray her memory, insisting she had withheld a confession. Raj accused Sarah of seeking personal relief in ancient texts. Eva remained the anchor, pleading for unity. Shadows darted like tribal specters across the fractured floor, feeding their distrust. Each raised voice resonated as a crack in the fragile barrier between worlds. Realization dawned. The curse thrived on discord. To withstand its pull, they needed not only courage, but the solidarity they had nearly sacrificed. When dawn refused to arrive, they faced a grim truth. Liam had vanished. His lantern lay shattered in the pews, its glass smeared with something dark that congealed at the edges. Footprints led from the chapel door into the woods, then stopped abruptly at the lake's rim. Panic ignited. Ava's heart seized as she recognized the pattern mirroring Elira's final footsteps. The distant lapping of water felt mocking, an echo of the night she lost her sister. Without hesitation, Eva grabbed the journal, certain that its final entry held the key to reclaiming their friend. The shore of Myrmor stretched like a silent threshold, reeds brushing ankles and sending ripples across tinted water. No breeze stirred, yet tremors pulsed beneath the surface. Sarah refused to follow, her gaze transfixed by an upturned photograph half buried in muddy sand. It showed Elira and her lost love, arms entwined beneath autumn trees. An image of hope turned tragic. Raj knelt beside Sarah, offering a steady hand while Eva stepped closer, reciting lines from the journal that spoke of forgiveness and release. Elira's final words, penned in quivering ink, revealed a ritual of absolution. One must cast her own confession into the water, acknowledging pain willingly offered for healing. Without it, the spirit would cling to any vessel brave enough to open the door. Ava closed her eyes and whispered fragments of memory. Her twins' laughter, her promises to save her, her own inability to prevent that final plunge. With measured breaths, she tore a page from the journal and crumpled it in her fist, ready to let go of the tether binding Elira's anguish. The night deepened around them as Eva tossed the confession into the lake. The page floated for a heartbeat before sinking, tearing the mirror of water into concentric waves. A keening wail rose from the depths, resonant with centuries of grief. The surface roiled, and a shape emerged, Elira's form, limbs alive with the restless pull of tides. Her eyes, once soft with compassion, flared with fury and heartbreak. She stretched a spectral hand toward Ava, whispering a plea, born of longing and vengeance. Liam's voice echoed from the ripples, not his own, but woven with Elira's sorrow. "Join me," he urged, tone both familiar and unearthly. Images of reunion with her twin tempted Ava. An embrace unbroken by time, a joy untainted by loss. The reeds whispered counterpoints, reminders of pain, the void where life once thrived. Ava's tears mingled with rain as she steadied her resolve, repeating the incantation of release from the journal's margins. Each word felt like a fracture being sealed, an unspoken promise redeemed. Elira's figure convulsed, as though racked by storms beneath a dark sea. The spectral waters hissed against the shore, but the chant held firm on Ava's lips. Liam's shape, a shell animated by grief, reached out with urgent yearning. A final verse broke the chain. Ava's confession not only forgave the witch, but offered compassion where none had been shown. With the last exhalation, she spoke the word that bound past and present, love and betrayal, sorrow and hope into a single pulse of absolution. Silence descended like a shroud as Elira's form dissolved into mist, the lake's surface smoothing until it gleamed once more under the muted moon. The reeds stilled, and the chill receded from Ava's bones. Liam collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air as if returning from some fathomless abyss. Sarah and Raj rushed to his side, their relief palpable, though tempered by exhaustion. No flames lit the sky. No triumphant chorus heralded victory, only the hush of a haunting undone. As dawn's pale light touched the horizon, the chapel and village seemed suspended in a collective breath. The rot of despair had loosened its grip, leaving behind only the quiet echo of a loss transformed. Ava knelt by Myrmor, pressing her hand against its tranquil surface, and felt something new rise from the depths. A fragile peace. She withdrew her hand slowly, letting the water slip away, like a dream dissipating in daylight. Her reflection looked back at her, softened, yet marked by the weight of what she had endured. The group packed their gear with silent efficiency, each grappling with their own revelations. Sarah tucked the photograph into her jacket, an emblem of love maligned and reclaimed. Raj snapped shut his camera bag, mind already racing through the footage of impossible events. Liam stood apart, staring at the rippling horizon, fingers brushing the faint imprint of shoreline in his memory. None spoke of the future or what awaited them beyond the forest's edge. Words felt inadequate to encompass the night's ordeal. On the path back, the forest seemed less menacing, as though acknowledging the covenant struck at the lake's margin. Fallen leaves formed a carpet of russet and gold, cushioning their steps. A solitary raven perched on a branch overhead, its coal eyes watching with inscrutable wisdom. It lifted its wings and squawked, as if granting permission to leave. Ava followed its flight until the trees thinned and the broken rooftops of Blackwood Village re-emerged, familiar, yet forever altered by the truths they carried. Emerging onto the main road, they paused beneath a battered sign bearing the village's name. The fog had lifted, revealing distant hills glowing in morning light. Sarah exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she held. Raj allowed himself a tentative smile, and Liam folded his arms against a breeze, now tinged with warmth. Ava lifted her camera, capturing a final shot of Blackwood's empty roads and silent dwellings. In that frame lay both the shadow of what they had faced and the promise of stories yet untold. Hours later, back in the safety of their rented cabin, they reviewed the footage in silence. Ava's voice, calm and steady, narrated each moment. The chapel's trembling air, the journal's revelations, the echoing voices in the dark. As she spoke, she realized her own tone had shifted. Where once she sought shock value, now she sought understanding. The camera caught tremors in their expressions, the flicker of tears in Sarah's eyes, and the haunted reflection in Raj's lens. Even Liam, sitting rigid, could not mask the tremor of relief in his shoulders. They debated how to frame the story for their audience, as a cautionary tale of unchecked grief, or as a meditation on the power of forgiveness. Each suggestion felt partial, incomplete. Finally, Eva tapped the desk's worn surface and said, "This isn't just about terror. It's about facing loss, naming it, and releasing it." She replaced the final shot of the lake with her own face, pale but resolute, and teased the question lingering in her mind. Could art offer the closure reality could not? Editing stretched into the night, the glow of screens illuminating determined faces. When the final cut settled into place, the video told a narrative that was at once terrifying and tender. Scenes of creeping fog interwove with intimate confessions. The journal's words faded into images of rippling water. Eva's closing monologue spoke of heartbreak and hope, acknowledging that some stories end not with a scream, but with a quiet reckoning. They exported the file, each heartbeat echoing in the hum of the hard drive. Before uploading, Eva placed a finger on the play button and smiled wanly at her reflection. The digital clock read 2:17 a.m., a time long since surrendered to restless creation. She typed a title: Blackwood's Curse, The Water Witch, and stared at it, feeling its weight. It would reach countless eyes, stirring fear and empathy in equal measure. She paused, considering the responsibility of storytelling, to honor the truth beneath legend, to invite viewers not only into darkness but also toward understanding. When the upload completed, they gathered in a loose circle, exhaustion giving way to a quiet exhilaration. Sarah broke their reverent hush. "Whatever response we get," she said, voice soft as moth wings, we'll know we faced something real. Raj nodded, fingers brushing the journal's spine, which lay poised on the table. Liam met Eva's gaze, his eyes reflecting the embers of a fear confronted and a bond reforged. None needed to speak the unspoken vow, to heed the stories that linger in shadows and to bear witness. By dawn, the video had gone live, rippling through cyberspace like a pebble cast into still water. Comments flooded in, disbelief at phantom voices, awe at the spectral glow on the lake, gratitude for the deeper meditation on grief. Some viewers pleaded for more footage, others confessed personal losses triggered by the tale. Ava read each message, her pulse steady, as she absorbed reflections of her own journey mirrored back by strangers. In that communion of witness, she sensed an echo of Elira's longing for her pain to be understood. Late that afternoon, Ava returned alone to Myamore's edge, drawn by an urge she could not name. The path through the reeds seemed inviting rather than forbidding. She knelt at the water's brink and watched her reflection shimmer among drifting petals that dotted the surface. A gentle ripple trailed outward, and Ava closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of stillness. For a heartbeat, she felt her twin's presence in the light breeze, a silent confirmation that some bonds transcend absence. As she rose, a small hand broke the water's surface, fingertips brushing a stray leaf. Heart pounding, Ava leaned closer, sure it was her sister's spirit come to speak once more. The hand slipped beneath the surface, leaving only a cluster of petals drifting on ripples. Ava exhaled a breath she didn't know she held, a bittersweet smile touching her lips. Not every answer arrives in flesh and bone. Some arrive in the hush between heartbeats, in the promise carried by water and wind. Walking away, Ava carried the hush of the lake with her, the knowledge that sorrow and solace exist in tandem. The sun dipped low, casting the village in amber haze. She paused beneath the sign, tracing its chipped letters with a final glance. Ghosts might wander forgotten by most, yet through remembrance they gain voice. Through her story, Elira had spoken not as a monster, but as a wounded soul seeking truth. And in that truth, Eva found a measure of peace. Some ghosts don't want to be found, but some just want to be heard. And in those echoes, there lies the path from despair to understanding, where grief sheds its endless weight, and the world, for a moment, glimpses the fragile grace of release.